get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
And welcome aboard, Kneecaps Nation. You are locked and loaded for another edition of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, we are fully aware that no matter where you're tuning into this podcast, chances are it's significantly colder than what you're comfortable with. But hopefully you're nice and warm and toasty, and we're able to get down to some football chit-chat here this next little bit.
Yeah, hopefully the football chat will warm you up. But for many of us here in Michigan, Sunday at least, it was a good day to just kind of stay indoors if you weren't already, snow blowing or doing something like that. Again, it wasn't so much the accumulation, just downright bitterly cold. And newsflash, we're in the middle of January, not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, man, here we are. I mean, it kind of just is the name of the game at this point. So it's nice to have sports as a reprieve. I mean, obviously, if you know me in my personal life, you know that I got a lot going on this time of year. And today in particular, we're recording this on a Monday night. It's going to drop on your devices on Tuesday morning. And my sports are intersecting. I literally just walked in the door from doing a high school basketball game and quickly said hi to the wife and son and Perry, and boom, off I go to do the podcast and talk football. So sports are intersecting, and it's making these dog days of winter a little bit more tolerable to keep more on the brain. So we're going to try and provide that little bit of an escape for you over this next little bit of time here. And we didn't really have a whole lot going on as far as the Lions. I mean, of course, unless you were out from under a rock, they haven't played in a handful of weeks, and the offseason hasn't really started in earnest yet. But as you may remember, in our last episode, we did talk about the hiring of Drew Petzing to be the new offensive coordinator. And that was literally just off the press when you and I recorded the episode from last week. So there really wasn't a whole lot of context and backstory other than what we saw at face value. Now, what we've heard since then, Phil, is that both the Lions organization and Mike McDaniel, who's kind of the number one target in the eyes of Lions fans to be the offensive coordinator, both sides kind of spoke up about it after the fact, and I think both sides liked each other a lot, but it just wasn't the right fit. Now, what do you take that to mean, Phil? Do you think, hey, maybe it really wasn't a good fit, or do you think there was another message hidden in there beyond that? Your thoughts?
I think we as Lions fans had this wish list. I think Mike McDaniel was, atop of this wish list. I think it could just be, I don't even think it's a personality difference or anything like that, because I'm sure Dan Campbell has some coaches on that coaching staff that, are maybe different personality-wise from him. I think it's more of a philosophy thing for what Mike McDaniel wants to do versus what Dan Campbell wants to do. At the end of the day, it's all about scoring points. It's all about the efficiency. It's all about keeping that other team's defense on the field, and then winning the game ultimately when you're an offensive coach. But I think there's basically 2 different ways that you can go about doing it. For me, I think McDaniel's a little bit more of the flashy variety than what Dan Campbell would like. Yes, we did have a little bit of the trick play, variety of things with Ben Johnson. I don't think Ben Johnson, the way he called things, were necessarily flashy. You look at what we ended up getting with our offensive coordinator hire. No surprise, the former tight end in the NFL wants to have an offense that is going to feature a lot of tight ends. So I don't think that was necessarily part of the ingredient mix down in Miami with what McDaniel was running. So I think personally it's just a little bit of a different, ask for what they wanted to do offensively.
And that's exactly it. I mean, I think Mike McDaniel is one of the most innovative offensive minds in the game, and always trying different things and different packages and personnels. And he's probably one of those types who he's sitting on the John in the morning and he's jotting things down on his hand that he can maybe try out and practice that morning. He's always on the go in terms of what's going on in his mind as it pertains to the offensive side of the ball. You pointed out, Phil, you have somebody like Dan Campbell and the guys that are surrounded by him in the front office that are making personnel decisions and what have you. And I think they have this picture in their mind of exactly how they want it to look. And I think they view bringing in a guy like Mike McDaniel, who's always looking to be innovative and creative and what have you. And I think they viewed that as upsetting the apple cart. And I get that. I think as a fan, I think I am interested in having my organization at least be willing to make some changes because we saw that, hey, maybe it wasn't the scheme after all. Maybe the players were not executing at the level that they are, in many cases, getting paid to. And this is one that we know already. The offensive line just wasn't up for the challenge.
Right.
So who knows? Maybe it's less about scheme and X's and O's than it is about execution. So maybe you just like to see something a little bit different because you don't want things to get overly stale because when things get stale, that's when regimes kind of fall by the wayside.
So what's interesting is, of course, by all accounts, it seems like we kind of passed on bringing Mike McDaniel here, or at least experimenting with this. He's now going to be teamed up with Jim Harbaugh out as the Chargers offensive coordinator. And, at face value, I would say it's very much like what you would think with Dan Campbell with Jim Harbaugh in terms of like, I think they have things that they want to do a set way. When I think Harbaugh, I think run the ball. I think everything that we saw at Michigan, that's how he wants his offense to be. Not ask too much of J.J. McCarthy. Well, he's got Justin Herbert. He's got a much more effective quarterback out there. So
And Jim
I'm going to
Harbaugh
be
likes to have his hands all over the offense too. So at
absolutely,
first glance, that seemed a little bizarre to me that they would go that route.
yeah. So again, it sounds like McDaniel will still interview, I guess, for a couple of head coaching vacancies, notably not the Cleveland Browns.
Kind of like the
But
Brian Flores arrangement that, hey,
yep,
we're extending your contract to be the defensive coordinator of the Vikings, but if you get a head coaching job, we'll part ways amicably.
yep, yep. But nonetheless, that's going to be an exciting team to watch, just to kind of see how they put it all together.
So, some Monday news of this week coming in as far as the offensive coaching staff is concerned. Mike Kafka, who was the former offensive coordinator, who then became the interim head coach of
Yeah,
the Giants after Brian Daboll was let go earlier this season, is now joining the Lions coaching staff in a position to be formally named a little bit later. Now, what's interesting about this is it's kind of like Dan Campbell going back to how he built this thing originally, where you're loading up on former players
yeah.
to serve on your coaching staff. It kind of seems to me like maybe I'm just being short-sighted with, John Morton and some of these other guys they brought in this year. They weren't kind of like those, oh yeah, this guy played, this guy played. Mike Kafka is granted, he didn't do a whole lot, but he's a Northwestern graduate, so he knows the Great Lakes region pretty well. He did have an NFL playing career, a coaching career, so on paper, this kind of seems like a guy that makes sense to serve on this coaching staff in some particular capacity.
Yeah, and to me, what's really interesting is he was in the mix for this offensive coordinator role, and he's going to be coming here now. He didn't get it. The Lions and kind of how they want to run things with him must have been still very appealing to Kafka to still want to be involved. How many people, unless it's like Hollywood and someone's going for that like that one actor role or something like that, get turned down for something and then kind of get offered up a lesser opportunity and they kind of jump at it. So I'm not entirely sure, what his other options were looking out there, but um, the way I approach it is in this capacity, he's not going to be the play caller. I don't think the Giants' play calling was necessarily great under his watch.
Even
But
then,
what
I
I
think
think
Brian Dayball did it for most of the time anyway.
until he got let go. Yep,
Yep.
absolutely. And The thing that I like though is that it is another capable eye in game prep. When you're looking at film review, breaking things down, you're getting another quarterback in the room with Jared Goff. I think that can only help. So we'll see what his role is entirely. I'm sure at some point, leading into the off season here or training camp, they'll kind of elaborate on kind of how this whole organization from the coaches that are going to be in, and if we do have other coaches leaving, what that'll look like.
So on paper, like we said, that makes a lot of sense from just a scheme and consistency standpoint. But also, again, I say this selfishly, you got to think this is also going to help on game day from a quality control standpoint. That's one less thing, hopefully, that Dan Campbell is able to weasel his way in on. If you're trying to circumvent what Drew Petzing does, that's one thing. But if you have Petzing and Mike Kafka, who are pretty heavily involved in this offense, hopefully that leaves less room for Dan Campbell to want to go in and trump a lot of what they're doing, and he can focus on just being the head coach of this team. And like I said on our last episode in particular, and we've also said it in episodes past, the best version of Dan Campbell for this team is the head coach, not the head coach and play caller. There's a lot of head coaches in this league that insist upon being the play caller on whatever side of the ball they are most experienced and comfortable with. And in many cases, that does work. A handful of names come to mind, but a lot of times it doesn't really work out. And because they're the head coach and what they say goes, they just keep going back to the well year after year and saying, I can call plays better than anybody else because I said so. In reality, that's not really the case.
No.
So I think we can all agree that if you get a couple of guys in here that know what they're doing and have some track record of being able to do some of what Dan or most of what Dan Campbell wants to have in his offense, hopefully that means he can focus on just quality control and being the head coach and not letting silly stuff fall by the wayside, because it's no secret that just stupid things like pre-snap penalties, if you will, big time increased once Campbell took
Yeah.
over as the play caller, because he's not having his eyes on the whole product. You're forced to kind of have tunnel vision because you got the cheaters on and you're looking at your play card and things are happening under your nose and you're not seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just the way that we need to approach this is that, you know, Dan Campbell is a certain specific type of coach, and if he can kind of go autopilot on what needs to get done, allow it to get done, I think we're just going to be in a much better spot.
So you and I have talked a lot about the offensive coordinator because, of course, that position has been open up until quite recently. What we haven't been spending nearly as much time talking about is the defense, and that's because the defensive coordinator position is not currently up for grabs. But what I want to know from you, Phil, is we all know what happened with the defense this past year. The secondary was completely decimated by injuries, and it started way back in the playoff game against the Commanders in January of 2025 when Amik Robertson went down with that injury in the first quarter, not to be seen. And that was almost kind of like, uh-oh, here we go. And it didn't get any better in 2025 from there on out. Every member of that starting secondary wound up missing the rest of the season. If you look
Hmm.
at Terrion Arnold, if you look at DJ Reed, actually he came back just in time for the end of the season, but he missed significant time in there. And then, of course, Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. So we all know why the secondary struggled. But on the other hand, the front seven finished the regular season by and large healthy. And what
Yeah.
you saw down the stretch was a mysterious inability to stop the run. We all knew going into it they were going to have a real hard time getting to the quarterback because they just didn't have the personnel for it. And we
Hmm.
jumped and kicked and screamed all off season long and all season long, and nothing ever got done about it. So we knew that was going to be a thing, but we all knew in the back of our mind hey, at least we can stop the run. And until they couldn't. And really, that front seven, again, by and large, healthy at the end of the season, couldn't really do anything right. So, what I want to know from you is the Lions had Kelvin Shepard, they promoted from within his first year as defensive coordinator. Do you think he did enough in year one to warrant a second chance? Or do you think the Lions, while we're still within the hiring cycle, if you will, shouldn't be keeping their eyes open at other avenues just in case?
So I think a couple things are at play. I think it's almost a case of like both could be true because I, for one, didn't think the Bills were necessarily going to fire a Sean McDermott, for instance. Like he's
It makes
very
all the
good,
sense in the world if you think about it, because at some point you can only knock on the door so many times.
right? That team, I think, had a lot of flaws that I think were a little bit out of his control. You never know when those type of coaches are going to be available as a defensive coordinator. And I think it is an incredible story to see Kelvin Shepard become a player, kind of progress through this Lions coaching staff system, work with Aaron Glenn, get into his spot as a defensive coordinator. We, of course, still have the Rooney Rule in place, and I don't think there's ever going to be nearly enough minority coaching candidates for as many, minority players are in the NFL. So I think all that stuff is very, very good. Um, but it's also kind of one of those things that when we as Lions fans see what our window is like and have it close, I don't think we can necessarily like afford the opportunity to go trial by fire and just see, well, let's see if it works out. I saw some things I liked from Kelvin Shepard, but it also seemed like in some instances there was definitely a drop in experience that we had from Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn is still the head coach of the New York Jets. It sounds like now some of the reports out of New York are that they're trying to target and get Alex Anzalone. I'm assuming they've got a little bit more cash than we do. So we'll see how that plays and develops. But with Shepard, it's like I think he gets this next year, and I think that's why they didn't make the move. But at some point, it's like, does he need to almost be if we can't get this turned around with who's going to be healthy on that defense, and if this is what is going to keep us behind, yeah, like I think he needs to go be, a assistant defensive coordinator, so that ultimately, like, who's running everything on that defense is going to be someone who's got a little bit more experience. Doesn't mean necessarily he's a bad coach or that he's not going to become a head coach one day or that's going to sidetrack him for this progression. But like, I think we as Lions fans need to be greedy who's on this coaching staff, the players who are on this roster, because we have waited our entire lives for this Lions team to be competitive. And we took a massive step back this year.
And what you have to keep in mind, again, I'm looking at it from the fan perspective here. The Lions organization is charging Lion fan Super
Yeah.
Bowl level pricing. And you know this as
Tell me
well as
about it. Oh
anybody,
yeah.
Phil, being the
Yeah.
season ticket or Lions loyal or whatever then the blue heck they refer to you as.
LLM, Lions
Yeah.
loyal member.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, they're charging you Super Bowl level to enjoy this team on game day.
hmm
So it's only fitting that a fan would expect the Lions to have that kind of all in Super Bowl level approach to how they're building this roster, how they're formulating a coaching staff, and what their approach to fielding just an overall product is. And it seems like there's a disconnect somewhere. It kind of seems, I think you kind of used a slightly different verbiage than this, but a little bit of trial and error with this defensive coordinator. I think they used it as who's the most deserving of this
Yeah.
job as opposed to who's the best person for this job. And I think there were times over the course of the season where he looked a little bit overmatched as far as, hey, was this the right thing to do here? Is this the best package to utilize? Why are you insisting upon continuing to play man where we saw it in the Bears game, week 18? The instant You switch to zone, you have them stymied. Now, part of it, I'm sure, is because Ben Johnson knew in the back of his mind, okay, they're going to do man, and this is what we're going to prepare for all week, and then change up. They weren't expecting the switcheroo in there.
Yeah.
But I just had to at least get your thoughts on that, Phil, just because we're still in that window of, hey, there's candidates out there, and is Kelvin Shepard the best guy they can get when we're chasing a window that is closing faster than people I think are aware that it actually is?
We have so many questions in our secondary right now, but I would venture we're gonna, with the injuries we've got, we got to throw some money in free agency towards some vet to get them in there, whether a corner, whether a safety, whether in the nickel. But this defense, in my opinion, is going to be led by three people. It's Hutch, it's Jack Campbell, and Ali McNeil. And Ali McNeil had an awful year coming back from injury. He has to get back healthy, or this defense, we're just going to be a sieve up the middle.
And see, I'm glad you put it that way, Phil, because I'm going to take it in a different direction than that. I think the three most important pieces of this defense are Hutch, Jack Campbell, and player that does not reside on this roster just yet because he's going to be lined
Okay.
up on the other side of Hutchinson. That's the only
Yeah.
way that you're able to get anything out of this defense that's going to be halfway representative of a winning product. And I know
Yeah.
this flies in the face of everything that they've done so far, but if they have any type of anticipation of joining the likes of the Jaguars and some of those other teams as the worst to first, take the Bears, for instance, worst in the division to first in the division next year, they're going to have to do something they haven't done yet with this defense, plain and simple. And it's a long off season, and you and I can get more specific into what exactly that means once we get into the dog days of the off season. But I at least wanted to start the conversation on that while we're still, like I said, within that hiring period. The retirements are starting to trickle in for Lions personnel. Dan Skipper announced the other day that he is reporting as retired. So we won't be able to see big number 70 in
Big
Lions
Skip.
Honolulu Big Skip in a Lions uniform. And it got me to wondering, Phil, okay, so we knew that Frank Ragnow kind of surprised everybody in the clubhouse with a late retirement a season ago.
Yeah.
Skipper retires shortly after the season. There's speculation of what Taylor Decker is going to do. There's even a little bit of speculation of what Graham Glasgow is going to do. Do you have a lean one way or the other about some of these guys? Will they, won't they, as far as retirement goes?
Yeah. Taylor Decker has always been brutally honest and outspoken, I think, as far as trying to be direct with the media, letting them know how he's feeling. He's been in the here with the good times and the bad times.
The old guard.
And yeah, I would be very, very surprised if he comes back at this point. Again, I'm not him. I have not heard one way or the other. But that man was so brutally honest with how he broke down how his body's breaking down. His family needs him. Like, he's got all these kids at home. So I think he has contributed enough. If he wants to come back, okay, I think he's awarded the opportunity to begin the season as a starter, but the Giovanni Manu project has not worked. I know we need that other defensive end. I know we need secondary help. But if Taylor Decker retires, I think Penei Sewell needs to move over to the left side, and I think you need to draft. Unfortunately, because it's an asset that we didn't think we would necessarily need, an offensive tackle, probably in the first or second round.
Who's
So,
ready to go week
and
one?
be a
That has
starting
to
right
be the
tackle.
caveat. It can't be
Yep.
a project like Manu.
No.
This guy has
No.
to be week one ready to roll
Yep.
and have a good head on his shoulders where he's not going to be false starting every third play.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Gosder Cherilus comes to mind. People of that sort,
Yeah.
Stocker McDougal,
Oh boy.
I can go on, these right tackles they draft and bring aboard that, oh, he jumped again. They
Stockton
don't ever learn.
McDougal, Aaron Gibson. Let's keep going through.
Good Lord.
Who's on our Lions bingo cards out there?
Yeah, buddy.
Oof.
Because I don't think you're going to find what you need in free agency, nor can you necessarily afford that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're even talking about center, the Linderbaum from the Ravens. Even he's going to cost you 20 million. And I think the Lions have allocated so much money to their own guys, which again, we have all offseason to talk about this whole philosophy as an organization, whether or not it actually
Yeah.
works. But I just don't know if that's in the cards. So I think you're pretty much stuck having to kind of adjust on the fly if you get some of
Well,
these retirements. And it should be worth noting that Taylor Decker was probably the, I use this term loosely here, but probably the most effective of any of the 5 offensive linemen this season. And that's saying something because none of them were really very good this year.
well, just as far as the investment goes, we know what the Lions have tied up in players that are here, and basically your quarterbacks, your tackles, and your defensive ends. Like no team is going to allow any of those players to hit the open market if they've got the salary to keep them in place and they want them. So that's why I almost kind of think that's got to be the move if Taylor Decker retires at this
Yeah,
point.
for sure, for sure. And again, there's going to be a time and place for us to really dive
Yeah.
deep into that philosophy of building an organization and continuing to fortify a roster. That just isn't going to be today because, well,
It's
time.
January.
And it's January, and we got a lot of runway between now and the time we go toe to rubber next fall. So that's to come.
Mm,
Now, what I do want to hit on in a more timely manner, though, is the AFC and NFC championship games, which were played over the weekend for the right to go to Super Bowl 60.
yeah.
And we were treated to some very entertaining yet very different for numerous reasons games. So the AFC went first, 3 o'clock Eastern time kickoff in the Mile High City between the Patriots and the Broncos. And we knew there was going to be a little bit of a different aura to the game. And we talked about it last week that Bo Nix was going to be out. Jarrett Stidham was going to be in. He'd have a full week of preparation to be the guy in the biggest
Mhm.
game of his life. And by and large, he held his own, and it was pretty much a tit for tat kind of game until the weather changed. And I thought, to CBS's credit, their production and graphics team really nailed it with doing
Yeah.
timestamps of where they were in the third quarter and framing that up with different pictures of how the stadium looked compared to what the weather was doing. And things really did take a hard left really, really fast in Denver for the second half of that game. And really, what it came down to was that the Patriots didn't flinch when the conditions changed, and the Broncos just couldn't get the stops they needed to, and they couldn't make a field goal to save their own life, regardless of where on the field they were. And it was the
Mm.
Patriots that wound up hanging on 10-7 in a, again, pretty close game. But if you like a lot of ball being thrown around the field and big explosive plays, you didn't get any of that in the AFC title game.
No, I think Drake May finished with about 80 yards passing,
Yeah.
which I don't remember the last time I've seen a quarterback in one of those championship games go sub 140 yards and be on the winning end of it. So that's the kind of game it was. Those kickers went through hell and back trying to just see where the field goal posts were. Looks like Invesco Field needed to go out to visit you at Weingarts and get some snow equipment to clear that field out, and
Yeah, absolutely.
um, but credit to the Patriots. I think they came in with a game plan that they thought was going to travel and work. Mike Vrabel, what he did in year one there, we knew that guy's a hell of a coach. And
And it
what
just goes to
he,
show how stupid Tennessee was
uh,
for letting them go. I
if
mean,
you're a
he
Titans
had them
fan,
as a number 1 seed at one point. Yeah, they fell on some hard times, but their solution was, hey, let's just get rid of the head coach.
they trade away AJ Brown. They lose a lot of their explosiveness on offense, and you know, all of a sudden Vrabel was like the fall guy for it all.
Hmm.
So if you're a Titans fan, you got to feel sick to your stomach with everything that's happened. But Drake May, right in that conversation with Matthew Stafford this season as NFL MVP. They're going to be playing for the Lombardi.
Absolutely. And as Lions fans all know, Dan Campbell is part of the Sean Payton coaching tree, probably his biggest active mentor in the game of football. And we talk about Dan Campbell with his fourth down decisions, and you can look at one similar for Sean Payton. He elected to pass up a field goal opportunity in the first half when the field conditions were just fine, the wind was just fine. He elected to pass up a field goal, which would have put the Broncos up 10-0. Instead, he chose to go for it on fourth and short, didn't get it, and the Broncos weren't going to score again the rest of the day. That just goes to show that even though you're looking at the clock and thinking, hey, here we are in the second quarter, there's still plenty of time, you don't know when the game's going to take a hard left in ways that you
Right.
don't realize, like the weather, for instance. And I'm sure Peyton is kicking himself after the fact that he didn't take those points because that was the difference in the game was that decision to kick a field goal or not to kick a field goal.
Yeah, it was like they almost should have alerted the coaches the weather that was coming by, and but who knows,
It's like
crazy game.
it's like people have, don't have weather alerts on their phones or something like that. Or wait, they do. Never mind. Then later on in the evening in the Pacific Northwest, for the third time this season, it was the Seahawks hosting the Rams in the NFC Championship game. And three times the teams have played each other this season, and three times the game went
Yeah.
essentially right down to the very end. The Rams had the ball with a chance to take the lead, and they could not get it done. It was pretty close all game long, in a lot more offense than what we saw in the AFC Championship game. But it was Sam Darnold, the left for dead numerous times over quarterback, that wound up being the guy to represent the NFC in Super Bowl 60. I'm sure you can look at it a few different ways, Phil, but the angle that I chose to take is I think Sam Darnold is about as close to Jared Goff as far as just
Oh yeah.
overall skill set as just about any other quarterback in football. And you look at everybody always talks about the mobile quarterbacks, the Lamar Jacksons and the Josh Allens, and even at one point, maybe when he was a little bit more spry and a little younger, Patrick Mahomes. He's gotten a little bit more pro style, if you will, in recent years. But everyone talks about the mobile quarterback. Guys who don't fall on that side of the Venn diagram is really Jared Goff, Sam Darnold, and pretty much nobody else. So, if nothing else, that kind of proves to a lot of people out there that if it's built the right way, if execution goes the right way, you can definitely go to a Super Bowl with a player of the skill set that Sam Darnold has or that Jared Goff has. It doesn't have to follow a certain particular mold of athletic quarterback or mobile quarterback or what have you.
Yeah, no, a lot of that comes down to protection, run game, receivers, making smart decisions. I think with Goff, it's all instincts, and I think when he has to speed up that timer because he is running away because that line isn't good, that's when you get the worst of Jared Goff. You get the Jared Goff that, oh, that's right, that's why Sean McVay wanted to trade him for Stafford. So credit to Darnold, he was slinging it around, he looked comfortable, it
And
looked
that's with that
downright.
oblique injury. He didn't throw the ball at all during practice this week.
Yeah, and it looked downright balmy in Seattle compared to what we were seeing out here in Michigan and that previous game. So they had good weather for an offensive showcase. And yeah, both teams I think came it down to the stretch. I believe both of us had the Rams in the pick, and I would say most people probably lean towards the Rams in that one. But Sam Darnold gets over the hump. Here's a fact for you as well. Sam Darnold will be the first ever starting quarterback of a team, or excuse me, starting quarterback from USC to play in the Super Bowl.
That's
USC, a
amazing.
massive school with some massive history, a blue blood that, I mean, isn't maybe as much of a blue blood as they have been in the past, but first quarterback from USC to start in the Super Bowl.
Absolutely amazing. One last note I do want to get your thoughts on before we sign off here, Phil, is Matthew Stafford. So
Yeah.
obviously the Rams are going to be watching Super Bowl 60 at home or on vacation or what have you. Is this the last we've seen of Matthew Stafford, or does he have another go-around left in that tank?
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. No, I think just because he had such a good season, and a season that I think a lot of people weren't even sure how his health was going to be coming into it, how effective he would be, that I think he just needs, take a couple weeks off, get back into it. I think both of us were pretty high on the Rams early on in the season to make it out of the NFC. So a little surprised they weren't the team kind of cutting through in the end, but I would venture I think he's still got another year or two left in him.
All right. The Seahawks will take on the Patriots in Super Bowl 60 on Sunday, February 8th, 6:20-ish kickoff on NBC. We're going to talk a lot more about that on our next episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast, but Phil and I are going to head our separate ways. In the meantime, we are
There's
glad
no
that
football. What are we going to do?
football. We're going to figure something out, though.
What is this?
We're going to figure something out.
Oh,
We're going to figure something
man.
out. We're going to have a great episode
Losing my mind.
next week. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Deep breaths, and in the meantime, stay warm, stay safe. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning. Go Lions. Forward down the field. Over and out.